ਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਪੁਜ ਬਲਬੀਰ ਸੁਖ ਸਾਗਰ ਗਰਤ ਪਰਤ ਗਹਿਲੇ ਹੋ ਅੰਗੁਰੀਆ ਗਰਤ ਪਰਤ ਗਹਿਲੇ ਹੋ ਅੰਗੁਰੀਆ ਸ਼ਰਵਨ ਨਾ ਸੁਰਤ ਨੈਣ ਸੁੰਦਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਸ਼ਰਵਨ ਨਾ ਸੁਰਤ ਨੈਣ ਸੁੰਦਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਰਤ ਦਵਾਰ ਰਟਤ ਪਿੰਗੁਰੀਆ ਦੀਨਾਨਾਥ ਅਨਾਥ ਕਰੁਣਾ ਮੈਂ ਦੀਨਾਨਾਥ ਅਨਾਥ ਕਰੁਣਾ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਜਨ ਮੀਤ ਪਿਤਾ ਮਹਿ ਤਰੀਆ ਸਾਜਨ ਮੀਤ ਪਿਤਾ ਮਹਿ ਤਰੀਆ ਚਰਨ ਕਵਲ ਹਿਰਦੈ ਗਹਿਨਾ ਚਰਨ ਕਵਲ ਹਿਰਦੈ ਗਹਿਨਾ ਭੈ ਸਾਗਰ ਸੰਤ ਪਾਰ ਉਤਰੀਆ ਨਾ ਹੋ ਜਤੀ ਸਤੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੜਿਆ ਮੂਰਖ ਮੁਗਧਾ ਜਨਮ ਪਾਇਆ ਪ੍ਰਣਵਤ ਨਾਨਕ ਤਿਨ ਕੀ ਸਰਣਾ ਜਿਨ ਤੂੰ ਨਾਹੀ ਵੀਸਰਿਆ ਜਿਨ ਤੂੰ ਨਾਹੀ ਵੀਸਰਿਆ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ I'm just opening up the next presentation, which is going to be the topic for today. Just before I do so, as you know, this whole month of Pau is full of shahidiyan, coloured in the blood of Dhan Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji Maharaj's family, although that's not the topic for today. But still, we've been celebrating in the past few days the Shahidi of Dhan Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Sache Padshah Maharaj. And then today, although according to the Gregorian calendar, it is the 20th of December, but according to our calendar, Desi calendar, today is the 6th of Pau. So tonight is the night that Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji Maharaj Sri Anandpur Sahib at just after midnight, Sache Padshah Ji Maharaj firstly rides to Sikhan Sahib, where they cremated the head of their father, Dhan Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji, and then they leave along with a group of around 500 Singhs, according to Kavi Pai Santokh Singh Ji. Some people say a little bit more than that. Niranjan Singh Sathi, in his book Charan Chalo Maro Gobind, says there may have been around 1,000 Singhs. But if we say between 500 to 1,000 Gursikhs who are still within Anandpur Sahib leave, and that journey which we all know of, the journey from Sri Anandpur Sahib to the river Sarsa, it begins on today's date. So even before I begin, I just would like to bring that into the minds of the Sangat who's listening. And alongside that, as you all know, the morcha is ongoing for farmers in Delhi right now. And again, this isn't my topic, but those of you who may have listened to my Chamkaur Sahib Katha will remember that there's a poem which I sometimes recite. Jagyanak Chamkaur nu vendiyan hi, jithe sutta ajit jujar tera. Bravery arises within me whenever I think of or contemplate Chamkaur, where in the battlefield your Ajit and Jujar lie down. Tatte hoye dil sab khalo jande, chiniya niyan ch dekh parwar tera. Those who have given up, even they rise up again when they see your younger sons being bricked alive. So the power and the resolution, the resilience of the Sangat who is there on the streets of Delhi is that same resilience. Whenever you ask someone or you hear an interview, especially, any of the people who are there, they tell you, the ones from Punjab, that we are the sons of Kalgitar. You'll usually hear that, especially in this month, Asi Kalgitar de pote hain. So Chumkor and Sarhand, they are always a catalyst for Sikhi. So this month is coloured in the blood of those shaheeds. So I know that that's not the topic for today, but obviously I'm conscious that during this month those Qurbaniyan happened. So I'd be happy to take questions a lot, which are on that topic as well at the end of this, about Sri Chamkaur Sahib or Sarhand, the Saka, and also the way the Saka has inspired people over the years. Okay, so putting that introduction to this month and all those types of things which you've probably heard before to one side, I'm going to be looking specifically at one text today. But whilst we look at this text, I want you to firstly have a look if you can see on. And I just confirm that you can still see the screen. Can someone confirm that from the moderator?
हाँ जी
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. So whilst this month is full of emotion, it's full of jazba, which is spirit. Alongside this, to feed that spirit, to feed that emotion, you need to have a connection with Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, with Gurbani, with Ityas, because when you have emotion which isn't guided, that emotion can sometimes take us further away from the path we want to go on. And so we have all this jazba, we have tears in our eyes in this month. How are we going to use that to pump us through the year? How are we going to internalize the shahidi of the Sahibzade? And that is why I'm trying to encourage. I know that most of you are used. I don't know Gordon the Padani. Once or twice I've used it before. But those of you who are probably listening to this are probably younger than me. I don't like to generalize. Sorry if that's not the case. But what do you do with all this emotion? What do you do with all this jazba and spirit? And so what I would encourage you to do is to delve into the treasure chest, which is Gurbani and Gur Ityas, and the literature which has been given to us in a treasury by our ancestors. So I have a set of questions here. The first question, how to escape the fear of death. Second, asking about the stages of bhakti. How can you remain in the Guru's charan? Most of you probably know the word charan means feet. How can you keep the Guru's feet or dwell in the Guru's charan, the feet, all the time? How do you escape anger, greed, etc.? How to do Simran or meditative remembrance? How to recognize saints? So these are questions which come up. So you have all this emotion, you're walking on the path of Sikhi. Where do you go for answers to these? Now, obviously, if we make this into a conversation, it becomes very long. We have limited time. I want you to just think of those answers yourselves within your minds. Where would you go? So these are questions which we ask, right? So if we're beginning bhakti or devotional worship, we say, well, okay, I'm beginning. What are the stages? Okay, so there's this thing called death. How do I escape the fear? You have all of these questions, and where do you go? Many of us, those of you listening, some of you will say, Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, but that's very vast, right? Satguru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj is an ocean which is limitless, right? So we usually give very vague answers. We say, oh, Gurbani, which sounds like a very great answer, and it is. Gurbani, I don't, many people will probably misconstrue what I've just said there. What I mean is when you look at these questions, where would you specifically go to? So answering Gurbani isn't enough here. I want you to type of thinking, where would I go? Would I go to, okay, so let's say the fear of death. Maybe I should go to Sheikh Farid, because Sheikh Farid ji mentions death. Or maybe I should go to Guru Nanak Dev Ji Shabad, Hum Aadmi Maut Na Jana. But if you're beginning and you don't have access to those Shabads, or you don't know them, then where can you go to get these answers in a small, compact form? And so all of these questions and many, many, many more, we have one source where you can go to answers. And that source is in front of you now on the screen. A picture. The picture is just a mala, but it's the source is called Sikhan Di Bhagti, which I've written in Gurmukhi, and underneath I've written in English. I've given this talk before, so if some of you have heard me say it or go through it, then please, I beg your forgiveness. But the reason why I pump this source up so much is because it is one of the core texts which it informs Kavi Santokh Singh. So Kavi Santokh Singh read this. Giani Singh would have read this. This was one of their go-to sources. Kathavachaks read this source. And those Kathavachak who don't read sources like this, they end up giving us examples from, out from outside the treasury of Sikhi. When you have all these sources, then why do you have to go outside to give an example? And I don't want to dwell on that too much. But we have one of these vast sources. So there's this. Many of you may have heard of this book before. Many of you may have not heard of this book before. But this is something quoted by greats like Giani Sukha Singh Miskeen. Currently, Paisabji Giani Pindarpal Singh Ji regularly quotes and has actually done a Katha series based upon this book itself. And you can find that on YouTube on Paisabji's channel. Okay, so let's go a little bit more into this book itself. So Sikhan Di Bhagti, what is Sikhan Di Bhagti? So Sikhan Di Bhagti is attributed to Paisa by Mani Singh Ji. Now, we'll go into that a little bit later about how it's attributed to Paisabji. But let's just start and look at the life of Pai Mani Singh Ji a little bit. So on the right hand side, on the right hand side as you're looking at your screens, you'll see an artist impression of Satguru Shri Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji, and on the left hand side you see a picture of Pai Mani Singh Ji, which this was actually drawn by a young artist from Toronto. So how does Pai Mani Singh Ji come into the Guru's Darbar? Satguru Har Rai Sahib Ji Maharaj, Pai Mani Singh Ji's father actually brings Pai Mani Singh Ji into the Darbar. And when Satguru Sahib Ji asks, who is this young child? Pai Mani Singh Ji's father says, his name is Mania. And so Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji looked at Pai Mani Singh Ji and said, E Mania, e Guniya beech jag sar. This Mania actually can mean a precious stone. So this precious stone will be Guniya, will be virtuous, and will be known throughout the world. So Bhai Mani Singh Ji, as they come into the Guru's Darbar, they're already given these blessings by Satguru Har Rai Sahib Ji Maharaj. And they carry on having a prominent place in the Guru's Darbar through the time of Guru Har Krishan Sahib and Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji Maharaj, well on into the time of Shri Guru Gobind Singh Ji and afterwards, as you know. So I've given you just a very quick summary of Paisabji's family here. Paisabji's grandfather is Pai Ballu, and Pai Ballu Ji actually gave their life in the first battle of the Panth, which is the Battle of Amritsar Sahib, which was fought by Tan Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji Maharaj, our sixth Satguru. Paisabji has 11 brothers, so they're 12 siblings altogether. And all of those brothers are Shaheed. And Pai Mani Singh Ji's brother was, one of them was Pai Dayala Ji. Pai Dayala Ji, as you know, was boiled alive before the eyes of Tan Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji Maharaj. And Tan Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji Maharaj loved Pai Dayala Ji so much. In one of their Hukamname, which you can read in a book called Hukamname by Dr. Ganda Singh, Tan Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji says, Dayale ka, Pai Dayale ka keha hoya, Guru ka keha manna. So accept what Pai Dayala Ji says as the words of the Guru. This is the greatness of Pai Mani Singh Ji. So Paisabji has 10 sons, 7 of which give their Shahidi. Pai Bachittar Singh Ji and Pai Uday Singh Ji actually give their Shahidi in these days of Poh. So Pai Uday Singh Ji, their Shahidi day is actually tomorrow. And Pai Bachittar Singh Ji, their Shahidi day is the 9th of Poh, which is one day after the Sahibzade. Paisabji has 10 grandchildren who are also Shaheed. And Paisabji's father-in-law is a person called Lakhi Shah Vanjara. Lakhi Shah Vanjara was actually the Gursikh who cremated the body of Tan Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji. So he's the father-in-law of Pai Mani Singh Ji, Shaheed. So I'm running through this presentation, by the way, very quickly. I don't want to take too much time on this. I want to get into the text, but I want you to recognize where is this Sikhan Di Bhagti coming from, and I want you to sort of look at Pai Mani Singh Ji's life. So this kabit about Pai Mani Singh Ji is actually from a book called Shaheed Bilas, which is written by Kavi Seva Singh, and it's probably the most comprehensive text about Pai Mani Singh Ji's life. And it explains, this text is recommended by Giani Sher Singh Ji, Ambale Wale. So you know, I know that during this camp you've spoken to Giani Ji or listened to Giani Ji. So Giani Ji actually recommends reading this text. And this kabit, it talks about Pai Mani Singh Ji's life very beautifully. Quoted it. This kabit has also been quoted by Giani Pindarpal Singh Ji in the Katha as well. So the kabit reads like this: Seva si karant te rahant gura paas sada likh likh bani kare pothiyan tiyar eh ਪੜਦਾ ਪੜਾਂਦਾ ਤੇ ਗਿਣਾਂਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਪ ਤਾਈ ਮਨ ਨੀਵਾ ਮਾਤੀ ਉੱਚੀ ਇਹੋ ਦਿਲ ਤਾਰੇ ਹਠੀ ਤਪੀ ਪੂਰਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸਿਦਕ ਦਾ ਪੁਤਲਾ ਸੀ ਸਾਖੀਆਂ ਸਿਦਕ ਦੀਆਂ ਕਰਦਾ ਉਚਾਰ ਇਹ ਸੇਵਾ ਹਰੀ ਐਵੇਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਬੀਤ ਗਏ ਬਰਖ ਕਈ ਜੁੱਧ ਦੇ ਕਰਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਡਾ ਹੁਸ਼ਿਆਰ ਏ So Bhai Seva Singh Ji writes, you know, Seva si Karant, he would perform Seva. Bhai Mani Singh Ji would. Rahant Gura Pa Sada would always remain with the Guru. Likh Likh Bani Kare Pothiyan Tiyar E, and would write Gurbani and give those Pothiyan out. Rahant Gur Pas Sada. So not only did Bhai Mani Singh Ji serve Satਵੇਂ, 8ਵੇਂ, 9ਵੇਂ Pasha, the 9th, 8th, and 7th Guru, but Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj, out of their 4 main scribes, Bhai Mani Singh Ji was the primary scribe, the first scribe, the one who overlooked everyone else. So Sache Patshahi Ji had 4 main scribes who would remain with Maharaj in turns, and Bhai Mani Singh Ji was the Jathedar, or the person in control of those scribes. Padda padhanda te ginanda nahi aap ta'i man niwa mat uchi eho dil atar e. He would teach other Gursikhs, remaining in humility, and sakhiyan sidq diyan karda uchar e. I don't want to go too much into the each of the words meanings, but Bhai Mani Singh Ji would prepare stories of resilience and faith, sidq. Seva Hari, Seva Singh, Hari means Singh here, Hari in Brij Pasha means Singh. Seva Hari, ime kime beet gaye bark gayi. Seva Singh says, in this way, many years passed away. Judd de karan vich vadda hoshiar hai. And Seva Singh writes something which we don't talk about very often, that Bhai Mani Singh Ji was also a great soldier as well. So that was just a little kabit which I think beautifully summarizes Bhai Mani Singh Ji's life. So getting back to Sikhan Di Bhagti. Now, Bhai Mani Singh Ji, this is the picture you can see is a picture from an old Satiq of Shri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, an old translation. I think this translation is the first pothi done by Giani Bishan Singh of the college, who was also a scholar of the Sampradaya. So I'm running through this because I want to get to the matter of what is actually within the book. But we're speaking here about Bhai Mani Singh Ji. So Satਵੇਂ Paatshah Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji's time, Bhai Mani Singh Ji comes to the Guru's Darbar. They stay in the Guru Darbar in the Guru's court all through to the time of Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji. They become the main scribe of Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji. Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji also entrusts Bhai Mani Singh Ji with taking Mata Sahib Devi Ji and Mata Sundari Ji to Delhi. As you know, when Maharaj's family separates, Paisabji takes them to Delhi. Some sources mention that Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj themselves sent Bhai Mani Singh Ji to Amritsar Sahib to become the head Granthi of Sri Harmandir Sahib. And we know that Bhai Mani Singh Ji was one of those Sikhs who listened to the whole of the Katha of Shri Guru Granth Sahib Ji from the blessed mouth of Tan Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji. And when Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji Maharaj from heart uttered the whole of Shri Guru Granth Sahib Ji at Damdama Sahib, Bhai Mani Singh Ji was the scribe, and Baba Deep Singh Ji would prepare the pens. And so Bhai Mani Singh Ji, Bhai Koir Singh, who wrote Gurbalas Paashai Dasmi, he actually, this is the greatness of Bhai Mani Singh. We all know that Bhai Mani Singh Ji gave his life, but Koir Singh in his Gurbalas Paashai Dasmi says, when he talks about where he got the sources to write Gurbalas Paashai Dasmi, he says, I base Gurbalas Paashai Dasmi on the katha that Bhai Mani Singh Ji did whilst in jail. So even whilst in prison, Bhai Mani Singh Ji was doing katha, and that katha actually, how detailed must it have been that Koir Singh based his whole book upon that katha, Gurbalas Paashai Dasmi. Our historical source is based upon the katha done in jail by Bhai Mani Singh. So that is the greatness, the caliber of this scholar. And so Bhai Mani Singh Ji begins the Giani Sampradaya. The Giani Sampradaya carries on to this day. Many of you will know Sant Giani Mohan Singh Ji Pindranwale. They passed away recently. They are from the Giani Sampradaya. And there's been countless other Gyanis. Giani Sant Singh Ji, who was the teacher of Kaviraj Bhai Santokh Singh. Bhai Santokh Singh was also a student of this Sampradaya. And I sometimes I haven't actually included it here, but there are lineages tracing back to Bhai Mani Singh Ji, and Bhai Mani Singh Ji is regarded by the Sampradaya. Sampradaya, by the way, can loosely be translated as tradition. So our scholarly tradition, it links back to Bhai Mani Singh Ji, and before Bhai Mani Singh Ji to other scholars such as Bhai Gurdas Ji. But the current Giani Sampradaya, they usually trace their lineage back. Bhai Veer Singh Ji, Dr. Bhai Veer Singh Ji is also from the Giani Sampradaya. Sant Kirpal Singh Ji, Sabto Galiyale, also from the Giani Sampradaya. Sant Jarnail Singh Ji, whose base was Mehta Chowk, they're also from the Giani Sampradaya. The Giani Sampradaya gave us all of these wonderful diamonds. So in this picture, you can see Bhai Mani Singh Ji listening to the Katha of Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji from Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj. So, Sikhan Di Bhagti is actually a writing down of Bhai Mani Singh Ji's Katha. So the Sikhs are writing down the Katha as Bhai Mani Singh Ji does it. And there are other books which are also written from Bhai Mani Singh Ji's Katha. So there's a book called Gyan Ratnavali, which is based upon the first Var of Bhai Gurdas Ji. It's also known as Janmasakhi Bhai Mani Singh Ji. And there are other works, as I said to you, like Gurbalas Pashi Dasmi, etc., which Gurbalas Pashi Shemi as well, which trace themselves back to Bhai Mani Singh Ji's Katha. And actually, an interesting fact, Bhai Sukha Singh, who decapitated Masarangad, actually was blessed with Amrit from the hands of Bhai Mani Singh Ji. And it was the Sangat of Bhai Mani Singh Ji which changed his life and which inspired him to become a Khalsa. So getting back to the book at hand, Sikhan Di Bhagti, the Sikhs asked Bhai Mani Singh Ji, can you perform Katha of the whole of Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vana? Now Bhai Mani Singh Ji says, well, you have to remember this is the time when Sikhi was under great strain by the government of the time. So Paisabji says, look, we can't do the whole Katha, but I will do Katha of one Var, the 11th Var, and if you listen to the Katha of the 11th Var, it will be like you've listened to the whole of the Katha of Bhai Gurdas. And a beautiful thing, when the book begins, the scribe writes down, Bhai Mani Singh Ji in his Katha says, Jive Sahban di khas rasna thi main suniya hai. As I have heard from the blessed mouth or the tongue of the master, tiਵੇਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਸਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਖਿਆਨ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ. That is how I will tell you. So Bhai Mani Singh Ji is saying this from what they've heard from Sri Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji. And here's another picture where you can see Bhai Mani Singh Ji is doing Katha, and you can see the Sikh writing down the Katha. So today we listen to Katha, but how do we listen to Katha? Many of us listen to Katha as sort of a spectator sport, as if it's like a rugby match. I don't know whether you know what rugby wherever you folks are, but we listen to Katha like it's some sort of spectator sport. Like the Kathavachik is there to entertain us. That's not actually what Katha is. Katha is not, oh, Giani ji ne mainu bahut hasaya. Giani ji made me laugh. Or, I'm not saying that Gianis aren't funny. I'm sure many Gianis can be and are, intentionally or unintentionally. But the idea of Katha is to see Guru di gal karde ho. And when you're listening to Katha, to see Guru nu sun rahe ho. That is the idea of listening to Katha. So the Sikhs of just this picture, it tells you, look at most of those Sikhs, how they're looking, Hath jode hua Paisabji. I know this is an artist's impression, but still, what is being depicted on the page, is an ideal which we should aspire to. And so just to quickly carry on, Bhai Mani Singh Ji says about the 11th Var. So Sikhan Di Bhagti is based on the 11th Var of Bhai Gurdas Ji. It's Bhai Mani Singh Ji's Katha, which is then written down by a scribe. And Paisabji is quoted to have said, Jiha Bhai di sari bani suni da phal hovega, teha is gosh sun wale nu phal hovega. So you will get the same phal or benefit of listening to just this one 11th Var as you would have read the rest of Bhai Gurdas Ji's Bani. So what is there actually in Sikhan Di Bhagti? There's a story of around 313 Sikhs, and these Sikhs they span from the time of Guru Nanak Dev Sahib Ji all the way to, and I've given the numbers there, 21 Sikhs of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, 15 of Guru Angad Dev Ji, Guru Amar Das Ji, Guru Ram Das Ji, Guru Arjan Dev Ji, Sheme Pasha, Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji, respectively. Now, although there are some differences in scholars about when this book was compiled, Dr. Dharmchand Batish says it was around 1715 to 1716. So if we take that date, that is only 8 years after Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji Maharaj body. And so I've given you the other works which are associated with Giani Blas Shemi, Guru Blas Pashi Dasmi, Janam Sakhi, etc., etc. Okay, so if what I'm going to do is for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about the contents of Sikhan Di Bhagti. Is it okay for us to carry on? Do we need to take a break? Can a moderator tell me?
It's fine.
What,
Yeah, we can carry on, Paji.
Okay, excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carry on now. I won't be able to go through 313 stories of Sikhs, but what I can do is I can give you a snapshot into this text. And the beauty of this text is Bhai Gurdas Ji just mentions the like 2 or 3 words. So for example, about Bhai Baba Buddha Ji, Buddha Buddha ik man te aave. That's all you get about Baba Buddha Ji in Bhai Gurdas Ji. Buddha Buddha ik man te aave. Buddha was Baba Ji's name before they became Baba Buddha Ji. From Buddha to Buddha ik man te aave, with single-mindedness, Buddha meditated and became Buddha, right? So how did that happen? The question is there. Bhai Mardana Ji, Majlis, there's only 2 mentions of Bhai Mardana Ji in Bhai Gurdas Ji's Var. The first is Ik Baba Akal Roop Dujar Babi Mardana, and the second is Majlis Mira Si Mirdana. And so how did Guru Nanak Dev Ji meet Bhai Mardana Ji? All these questions come up. And so this text provides us those answers. So I just want to give you, we'll start going into the text, the stories themselves, and why you should read this text. So one of the stories, one of the most beautiful stories, is the meeting of Guru Nanak Dev Sahib. So, I can quote to you the beginning. So this is this story. It begins, ਇੱਕ ਦਿਨ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਜੀ ਰਾਏ ਭੋਏ ਦੀ ਤਲਵੰਡੀ ਬੈਠੇ ਸਨ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਡੂਮ ਆਏ ਕੇ ਰਬਾਬ ਵਜਾਇਆ ਤੇ ਰਾਗ ਅਲਾਪਿਆ। ਤਿਸ ਦਾ ਰਾਗ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ ਮਨ ਇਕਾਗਰ ਹੋਇਆ। ਤਾਂ ਸਾਹਿਬਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ, ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਉ ਕਿਆ ਹੈ? ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਆ, ਜੀ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਉ ਦਾਨਾ ਮਿਰਾਸੀ ਲੋਕ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਨ। This beautiful, like the beauty of this telling, because it's writing down a Paisabji speaking. You get this storytelling, the fiber of this text. Whenever I pick up this text, I feel energized, because it gives you such a deep such a beautiful image. So this image here, you have Guru Nanak Dev Ji sitting there, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji hears Bhai Mardana Ji playing an instrument, and listening to that, Guru Nanak Sahib Ji's mind becomes so man ekagar hoya. Bhai Mani Singh Ji writes that hearing this, Guru Nanak Dev Ji can hear that this is their companion who will stay with them for the next 52 years, right? And so here it also tells us that Bhai Mardana Ji's initial name was Dana, right? And Guru Nanak Dev Ji says to Bhai Mardana Ji, "Tu rabab phali vajayenda." You play the rabab beautifully. Tenu ragan di phali soji hai. You already know about rag, about classical South Asian music. Asadi sangat kare. If you were to accompany me, e rag shabad pae ke gaave. If you sing the word of God or the word of Akal Purukh, to not use the word God, Akal Purukh, because it has many other connotations, the word of Akal Purukh in this music, ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇਰਾ ਦੀਨ ਦੁਨੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਧਾਰ ਕਰੀਏ. I will liberate you in this world and the next, right? Such a beautiful conversation and such accessible Punjabi. By the way, there isn't actually an English translation of this text which I'm aware of. at the moment. So this conversation comes, and so Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj says, you will be saved in this world and the next. Bhai Mardana Ji replies and says, well, if I was to go with you, how am I going to feed my children? Now I go and sing from door to door, and I gain money. If I go with you, how will I be able to look after my family? And secondly, I already do my namaz. I already keep my fasts, my roza, which in Ramadan. And so the next world will be sorted out by doing my fast and namaz. Guru Nanak Dev Ji then says to Bhai Mardana Ji, says, Danya, it's so beautiful, I've underlined it. Danya, tu diwana hoya hai? Oh Danya, have you gone mad? Are you crazy? And then Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, do you feed every single being on this earth? Who is it who feeds everyone? You're worrying about your family. Sache Pacha Ji says, let the one who feeds, the ants and all the other beings of the world to your worries and anxieties. And secondly, Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, you're talking about namaz and roza. Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, how many? Firstly, they asked Bhai Mardana Ji the meaning. And Bhai Mardana Ji says, well, I don't know what the meaning of namaz are. Namaz te roze da arth kya hai? Guru Nanak Dev Ji says. And then a beautiful question, kitne vele namaz te roza jagat vich aamda hai? So Bhai Mardana Ji, and this is the beauty of Bhai Mardana. Bhai Mardana doesn't know, Bhai Mardana Ji says they don't know. We don't know, but we give it the large, to use English slang. We say, nahi sanu pata hai. Halanke Sikhi is for those who say sanu nahi pata. But nowadays, my pracharak friends, my fellow pracharaks, we are the most guilty, because we say to people, no, this is the only way. And you can't say that. You can say, this is my interpretation, this is what I have understood. But you can't say, this is the technique of meditation, this is the technique, this is the only way. You can't say that. You can say, this Shabad from Gurbani, Maharaj is saying this to us, but I digress. It's just the glory of Bhai Mardana Ji. Bhai Mardana Ji says, look, I don't know the meanings. Then Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, well, how many times do they come into the world? Like that question, only Sache Pacha can think of that question. Bhai Mardana Ji says, well, Mars comes onto the earth 5 times a day, and Rose, they come, every year. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, where do they live? Look at the question. Where do they live for the rest of the time? So where does namaz go for the rest? Where do these fasts go for the rest of the year? The Ramadan, to use the English word, but Ramzan. Where does Ramzan go for the rest of the year? And Bhai Mardana Ji thinks and says, Khuda di Dargah, the house of God. And then Tan Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj says, Khudaye da ghar kaun hai? Guru Nanak Dev Ji asked the question. You say, Bhai Mardana Ji says, कि namaz, the fast, they live in the house of God. Well, where is this house of God? And Bhai Mardana Ji again truthfully answers the question. Bhai Mardana Ji says, Ji main dittha nahi. I have not seen it, I don't know. Then Guru Nanak Dev Ji says to Bhai Mardana Ji, Khudaye da ghar santan da hriday hai. The house of God is the heart of the saints. And in saying this, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is saying to Bhai Mardana Ji, if you go into the company of the saints, every minute of your day will become namaz. Every minute of your day will become a Roza, Ramzan. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji then blesses Bhai Mardana Ji with the Shabad, Panj Niwaja, Waqt Panj, Panja Panje Nao, Pehla Sach Halal Doe, Tija Khair Khudaye, Chauthi Niyat Ra, Panjvi Sift Sunaye, Karni Kalma Aakh Kehta Musalman Sadaye, Nanak Jete Kudayar Kudi, Kuda Kudi Jaye, Kuda Kudi Paye, sorry. So this text not only gives us that beginning meeting of Bhai Mardana Ji, but it also tells us where Guru Nanak sang the Shabad. And then Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, when Bhai Mardana Ji falls at their feet, then Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, Tera nao asa Mardana rakhya hai. Guru Nanak Dev Ji names Bhai Mardana Ji. So that's just one rich story which comes out of Sikhan Di Bhagti. I've been speaking for quite a while now, so what I will do is I'm just going to try and give you a few stories, maybe one or two of each Guru Sahib, and then carry on. In fact, I'm going to skip this story, even though this is a very very beautiful, telling us what is a sanamukh and a manmukh. I'm quite happy for you to take screenshots, by the way, of this, or if you want the PowerPoint presentation, I can, because it belongs to you, right? Sangat ji ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਖਜ਼ਾਨਾ ਹੈ. So if you want to look through this in your own time or ask me questions about Sakhiyan which I haven't gone through, then we can do that. You know what? I'll just go through this Sakhi because it's very beautiful. So these Sikh, if you look at the screen, and if you can read Punjabi, if you can't, no problem, but if you can, you will see at the bottom the Sikhs, their names, they're the ones who are asking these questions. So Kalu Khatri Bhagta Ohri and Japu Vansi. They ask Guru Nanak Dev Ji, you talk about Sanmukh and Manmukh. Who is a Sanmukh? Who is a Manmukh? So, you know, we ask these questions as well. So let's go through Manmukh first. Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj says, there are 4 nishaniya of a Manmukh, right? And you can read them in Punjabi. Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, Irkha, Akarna, Ninda, and Hat. So, what is Irkha? Guru Nanak Dev Ji defines Irkha. Guru Nanak Manmukh. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, you know that you are a Manmukh. Har kise naal bakhili karni, jo sabbe padarth maithe hi hovan, par kise hor thai na hovan. Sabna nu apna veri janna. So Irkha is this idea that may I have. When you see someone else that has something, then you get jealous. So this idea of jealousy, hatred, that is Irkha. Then you have number 2, Akarna. Akarna, Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj says, Homme karni, to be. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji actually defines this, that if you see someone who is less well studied than you, so less read or less learned, or doesn't have as many virtues as you, to laugh at them. That is Akarna. So Gursikh Pyareo, if you're listening to this, if we have these qualities, then we go under the Manmukh. It doesn't matter, you know, how, you know, I don't want to say anything to offend anyone, but it doesn't matter how is. What Sache Pashaji here is saying, you better weigh yourself up. Are you a Manmukh or are you a Sanmukh? And by mentioning Atra, by the way, just to clarify that, I'm not saying that Kakars, they don't have use. Of course they do. But Kakar, ਧਰਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਧਰਮ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਾਹਰਲਾ, even nishani isn't enough, but ਧਰਮ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਾਹਰਲਾ ਪ੍ਰਗਟਾਵਾ ਆ, the blossoming of the flower is only beautiful if there is a fragrance being emitted from within as well. So this is the inner fragrance of Sikhi. And you know, our barla roop is that blossoming. So then Guru Nanak Dev Ji says Ninda, slander. I'm not going to go into translating Ninda too much, but Hat. Hat here is not, you know, you may say, oh, but what about, we say in our das Hatiyan Tapiyan. Hat here means following your mind and not accepting, you know, the words of anyone else. That is Hat. Only following your mind, saying Mainu hi pata sab kuch. So if there's any of us like that, look at the Manmukh list according to Guru Nanak Dev Ji. On the other side, you have Maitri, the first nishani of a Sanmukh. Sanmukh means someone facing towards the Guru, or let's say someone facing towards the path of spirituality. Maitri means to see everyone as your friend. Karuna means when you see, it can mean compassion. So when you see someone who has less than you, not pitiful, and not to be filled with pity. Now I want to underline this. sometimes when we look at people who have less than us, we have pity. Karuna is not pity. There's a very much difference. Karuna means to help that person, to reach out to them, but not to think of them as less than you. Think of them as your brother. But Guru Nanak Dev Ji actually says, "Shote pai kes putter saman jane." That know them as your brother or your sibling or your child. Not looking at someone as a garib, but looking at someone as your sibling. Then mudta. Mudta means to be happy when you see someone else doing well. That is a very hard thing to do. Upekkha then means, the fourth one, not forcing advice down people's throats. Upekkha means sometimes allowing people to make their mistakes. Now, many Gursikhs, now I remember Gyani Pindarpal Singh once quoted Ruskin, I think in their Kathan, they said, Ruskin says that my mother beat the Bible into me. Now that is what we're trying to avoid. Because in Sikhi, you don't have that. You have Mata ki Asis. Blessings are the way of spreading, spirituality. So Upekkha means tell someone the right path once, twice, third time. If they don't listen, then sometimes you have to step back, and that is Upekkha. So this is a beautiful story. It's talking about Simran. It's talking about the stages of Simran, but I'm not going to go into it. It's a conversation between Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Baba Buddha Ji. And then you have this conversation between Pai Shihan, Pai Gajjan and Guru Nanak Dev about how to actually do Simran. I'm not going to go into that today. I'm going to leave that for you to actually look into the book itself. So I'm going to just skip forward to this story. So these are now the stories of Guru Angad Dev Ji. So Pai Khanu, Pai Maya, Pai Govind Pandari, they ask Guru Angad Dev Ji, they say, what are the stages of Bhakti? Guru Angad Dev Ji then replies and says there are 3 stages. So the first stage is the unripe stage. So what does that mean? That means a fruit which is unripe. And before you start arguing with me, tomatoes are actually a fruit, according to whoever sets the rules. But I'm sure there'll be divided opinions about that as well, as we have about everything else. But Jeda, getting back to the topic at hand, you have this first stage of Bhakti, which is unripe. So an unripe fruit is not, it doesn't have taste and it doesn't have color, right? And so when we're in this first stage of Bhakti, this is most of us, we start doing Simran, but we feel nothing. We don't feel a connection. We say, oh, no, I'm not. Guru Angad Dev Ji saying, you have taken a step on the ladder of Bhakti. Even if you cannot feel the taste within you of Simran, you are still on the Bhakti ladder. You're on that first step. So the second step, Guru Angad Dev Ji says, is when you start getting this yellowing of the fruit. So when the fruit starts ripening. So what happens? You start getting a little bit of taste in it. The color starts to change and it starts going yellow. And so Guru Angad Dev Ji says the second stage of Bhakti is when, after reciting Vaheguru Ji's Naam again and again, you start going into Bairag. And in Bairag, the color changes of your life. You start feeling little glimpses of that taste of nectar. And then the last stage is ripe. So when a fruit is ripe, it is full of color and is full of taste. When a Gursikh's Bhakti becomes ripe, they become full of that immortal nectar of Amrit Naam, and they also get that color of love. So these are the stages of Bhakti by Guru Angad Dev Ji. So I want to give you Guru Amar Das Ji. Guru Amar Das Ji Maharaj is asked by the Sangat of Dalla, when should we get together? Guru Amar Das Ji says, get together on the days of Sangrand, Amavasmi, Vaisakhi and Deepamala. So why have I mentioned this here? Because the word Diwali or Deepmala is found in our historical texts. And sometimes we say, oh no, we can't use this word. Hath jod ke benti, we can use any other word. But Diwali is mentioned in the Hukamnamas of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji, Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji, and here Bhai Mani Singh Ji uses Deepmala. But let's look at some Sikhs called Bhai Ramu, Deepa and Ugrasen. They ask Guru Amar Das Ji, say, Maharaj, all day we're working, how are we going to be saved? Guru Amar Das Ji says, Char kadiyan amrit vele baith ke Guru ke shabad da vichar karna. Now, one kadi is roughly 24 minutes. So, char kadiyan roughly comes to about 96 minutes. Char kadiyan we ਆਪਾਂ ਧੰਨ ਗੁਰੂ ਅਮਰਦਾਸ ਸੱਚੇ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਜੀ says ਵੀ 4 ਘੜੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਆ ਉਹ ਬੈਠਣਾ ਆ and ਸ਼ਬਦ ਦਾ ਜਾਪ ਕਰਨਾ. And then Guru Amar Das Ji gives an example. Maharaj says, when a boat is in water, only a very small fraction of it is above the water, the rest is. So most of the boat is underwater, only a little bit is above. Guru Amar Das Ji says, if you take out that 96 minutes of your life in the Amrita Vela, it will keep you afloat during the day, right? And you may say, oh, how can I do 96 minutes? You don't have to begin from 96 minutes. Begin from 9 minutes. Begin from 10 minutes, and then carry on and progress. So I'm coming to, this is a story of Shri Guru Ram Das Sahib Ji. So Guru Ram Das Ji Maharaj is asked, how can we become unattached whilst living in the world? Guru Ram Das Ji Maharaj says, when reading Gurbani, contemplate the meanings. That is the way you will become detached. So again, that's from Sikhan Di Bhagti. I'm just going to give you one story from Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj is asked by the Sikhs, what is Katha, what is Kirtan? Guru Amar Das Ji Maharaj, Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj, Mani Singh Ji says, Katha is like a mother. When you hear the exegesis of the scripture, Katha, it is like a mother. Why? Because a mother cleans up her child. And in the same way, and she loves her child, she laughs with her child, she cries with her child. In the same way, when you're listening to Katha, it is the Guru as a mother speaking through whoever it is, the Pracharak. And like a mother cleans her child, Katha will clean your impurities away. And then they ask, what is the father? The father, Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj says, is love. And then they ask, what is the child? Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj says, the child is Kirtan. When you have love and when you've listened to Katha of a Shabad, when you've listened to the exegesis of a Shabad, when you then sing it in Kirtan, you will have a different feeling. So yeah, here's an evil-looking cat in this presentation. There's a story behind this as well. So I'm just going to... these are now the stories of Guru Hargobind Sahib. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just go through this one. So the Sikhs, Bhagwan Das and Bhai Kataru, they come and ask Guru Sahib Ji about ego. Sache Patsha Ji tells them a story. Maharaj Ji says, well, once a cat fell into a well in a village and died in the well. And, the body started to decay. The water was polluted, obviously. And the people of the village went to a scholar and they said, what can we do? The scholar says, look, first take out the dead cat and then pour out 1,000 buckets of water, and then the well's water will be. So on the way home, they forget to take out the cat. They just pour out 1,000 buckets of water. After doing so, the water still smells. They go back to that scholar. They said, you lied. He said, what did you do? They said, we poured out 1,000 buckets of water. He said, Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji Maharaj says, when you're doing seva, kirtan, katha, when you're in the Guru's house, the dead cat that you need to remove is ego. So when you're doing these things, do it consciously. The goal is to take out that dead cat first. Otherwise, it will pollute the water again. So that is a beautiful example again in Sikhan Di Bhagti that we find. And you know, this slide by Chuhad asks Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji, what is the tree of Sikhi? This is again from Sikhan Di Bhagti. Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji Maharaj says, the roots of the tree of Sikhi is humility. The branches are selfless service. The leaves are the sangat of the saints. And the fruits are to contemplate or understand the Shabad. So, you know, it's a very beautiful. I'm going to wrap up the talk for today just with this line from Dr. Dharmchand Batish. And he writes, Guru Chak Bunge da e sitara jado akal purane de naal tut gaya si, vartak akash vich us di lishkdi neeli leek sadali amar ho gayi. Now, if you don't understand that, that's fine. That's what I'm here for. Guru Chak Bunga. So that's Amritsar Sahib. Satara means star. So this star of Amritsar Sahib, when they passed away in the command of Akal Purkh, or broke from the sky, Vartak Akashvich, in the sky of prose literature, they left a neeli leak, a blue line. So Dr. Taramchand Batish says, by Mani Singh is like this shooting star that leaves behind a line. And by Mani Singh Ji's life left behind Sikhan Di Bhagti, Janam Sakhi, Gurbilas Pasha Shemi, Gurbilas Pasha Dasmi, left behind all of these things, the Giani Di Sampradaya, which carries on to this day. And so Sikhan Di Bhagti is one of those strands of light from the shooting star that Bhai Mani Singh Ji was. So for those of you who'd like to know my sources for today's presentation, Sikhan Di Bhagti compiled by Bhai Veer Singh, Sikhan Di Bhagti compiled by Dr. Dharmchand Batish, Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji de Darbari Ratan by Professor Pyara Singh Padam, Pramukh Sikh Shakhsiyatan by Sardar Roop Singh, Shaheed Bilas by Kavi Seva Singh. There's also Sikhan Di Bhagti, which is compiled by S.S. Padam. There's other books as well, but I haven't. These are the main sources for today's presentation. So Sasangaji, please forgive my mistakes. And with that, we'll turn over to the moderators, and they can take over. So please forgive my mistakes, Sasangaji. Guru Fateh Praman Karni ji. Gaj ke Fateh Bala Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Paisab. We really appreciate it. Sangaji, can you guys please unmute your mic and give a jakara for Paisab?
ਗੱਜ ਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਪਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਮਨ ਪਾਵੇ ਸੱਚ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਰ ਮੈਦਾਨ ਫਤਿਹ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
Hanji.
Haji, thank you for joining us today, Paisab. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know.
No problem. Did you have any? Were we going to do questions and stuff now?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the questions was, what does akarna mean? Or akarna. It was one of the things.
Akarna.
Akarna. Yeah. So akarna is akkad can be translated in many different ways. Stubbornness is one sort of. So akarna is the sort of Saad Pasha, which is what the book is written in. It's a version of the Punjabi word akkad, which is, you know, sort of pride, arrogance, that type of thing. So you could say sort of self-conceit, that type of thing. So Bhai Mani Singh Ji goes through that, the Sanamukh Manamukh thing. So akkadna is, you know, to be full of sort of self-conceit.
So another question was, on what page is the Sakhi about the 5 evils?
There are many Sakhiyan which talk about the 5 about Kam Karo Mahankar in Sikhan Di Bhagti. One of the one of how to escape the fire is one of the first Sakhis by Guru Angad Dev Ji. So if you look into Guru Angad Dev Ji Sakhiyan, I'll actually it depends what version of the book you're looking at. So if you're looking at Veer Singh Ji's version, then that Sakhi would be on page 60 of the Veer Singh version, which is published by the Veer Singh Sahit Sadan in Delhi. So that's on page 60, and it's a conversation between Guru Angad Dev Ji and Bhai Kedari.
And another question is there any way we can get access to the PowerPoint?
Yeah, just you've got my email, so if people send me an email, or I can send it to you, put it in the server somewhere.
Sure, that sounds good. The next question is, how do you gather motivation to wake up for Amrit Vela?
By sleeping on time. Siddhi ji gall hai.
The next question is, how can we do Sangat of Mahapurakhs?
Getting back to that Amrit Vela question. So I would say you have to weigh up, like there was a beautiful, I'm sitting in my study room, right? Those of you who may know me may know that I'm my books on all left, right, center, sare passe. And just in front of me, I have some quotes written. So the top quote is actually from the civil rights movement in America. And it was a song that they would sing, keep your eyes on the prize. And so that is the idea, right? That is the idea of life. Keep your eyes on the prize. And Prani tu aya laha lan. Gurbani talks about it again. Dullabh de pai vadbhagi. Hana? Maharaj says, Hira janamya tera. So keep your eyes on the prize. That is what I would say to people. That Netflix movie or whatever it is in the evening, is that worth it? Or is peace of mind worth it? You have to weigh up yourself. It's convincing the mind, it's fighting, है ना? ठीक है जी?
Hanji. So the next question is, could you please give a short recap of the 4 qualities of a Sanmukh?
Yeah, so the Sanmukh qualities are Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha, which, if you want to put them in one word, Maitri would be, friendship with all, or looking upon all as your friend. Karuna would be compassion. Mudita would be, a joy for others when you see others doing. And Upekkha means overlooking. So you're overlooking the faults of others. That's a very quick translation. Obviously, they need a little bit more extrapolation. Hanji.
So the next question is the Giani Samprada the Damdami Taksal, or are they different?
Damdami Taksal branches out of Giani Sampradaya. So they all come under the of Gyanis. So Damdami Taksal is one of those branches of the Giani Sampradaya, as is Satugali, as is Sampradaya Pindra, as is many others. Many other little offshoots that we have, like Bhai Veer Singh Ji Sampradaya, Giani Hazara Singh, who was the grandfather of Bhai Veer Singh, also came out of that Sampradaya. Hanji.
How can we remember to do Simran while doing anything?
So, Jira Simran da Vishaya, it begins from Amrit Vela, from that morning, right? From the early hours. if there's a quote in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Har amrit vele vatte ka bijya bhagat khaye kharch rahe nikutte nahi. That which you have sown in the Amrit Vela will flower throughout the day. So make Amrit Vela part of your daily practice and you will see the difference it has upon your life. Maybe for some people it'll be quicker, maybe for some people it'll take a little bit more time, but that is the way, that to have that daily Amrit Vela, that will, with Guru's Kirpa, if you're doing it consciously with your mind, that will then blossom into a remembrance throughout the day. And Bhai Veer Singh Ji says, fill the gaps of your day. So if you're driving somewhere, fill that with Simran, or fill it with, Gurbani. If you're on the way, you're walking to the shops, fill that. Fill the gaps of your day that will help you fill your life. Which I found is a really, really useful quote by Bhai Veer Singh Ji. You had a question which we skipped, how to do company of the saints. Well, that's like saying how to feel warmth of the fire. Go and learn. Simply go with an open heart. Do ardas to Guru Sahib, and Guru Sahib will send them into your life. They will come. Just be ready to recognize them. Ask Guru Sahib Ji for the sight to recognize those Mahapurush or those great souls when they come into your life. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, another question was, is Bhai Nand Singh Ji also a part of the Giani Samprada?
Depends which Bhai Nand Singh Ji you'll be talking. So I think the person who asked that question can probably email me. There's not been one Bhai Nand Singh. There's many Bhai Nand Singhs.
Another question is, could you possibly repeat the third one of the signs of being a Manmukh?
So you have Irkha, Akarna, Ninda, and then Hat.
Also, just clarification, on the Nand Singh question, the person meant Baba Nand Singh.
So Baba Nand Singh Ji actually is more to do with the Nirmal Sampradaya. So their teacher, Baba Maharnam Singh Ji Puchunwale, was in turn a student of the Nirmal Sampradaya. So they would come under the Nirmal Sampradaya.
Another question is, you mentioned Simran. Can you explain that more?
I think that would be another topic for another day. It'd be a longer topic. I don't think we can do justice to Simran in a few minutes or a few seconds. But Simran, if we to use an English word, meditative remembrance. I was reading a book by a saint whose name was Sant Suran Singh. I read it in Toronto whilst I was staying at the house of a Gursikh, and they said, and in there it said, Sab pasyon vi Simran ho jaan da naam Simran. Simran means to forget everything else. So that is Simran in one line, but the topic of Simran is very vast, and if people want to listen to more, I've done Katha of the first Ashtadhyayi Sukhmani Sahib. You can find that on the SoundCloud page, which runs under my name, and I think there's 8 or 9 hours there about Simran. So I would advise you to listen to that, or if you have time, then to read a book called Bandagi Nama by Raghbir Singh Bir, and that will give you a lot of information about Simran.
How do we stay away from ego when doing seva?
Whilst doing seva, to be looking constantly at yourself, apne aap nu andro vekhna, right? Because ego isn't going to come in a big, or it's not going to come dressed in this big devil costume as we make it out to. It is within you. You have to be on alert and looking and conscious when you're doing these things and looking within. ਜੇ ਕੋ ਕਰੇ ਚਿਤ ਲਾਏ ਚਿਤ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਵੇਖਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਅੰਦਰ I know that some of these answers, because we're going through them pretty, not completely fulfilling, and I ask forgiveness for that already. And if you do want further, uh, if you want to discuss these things further, you can email me. But I do want to say alongside this, my answers are my interpretations. They are not the answer. So I don't usually, when we have question and answer sessions, I usually say question and suggestion. So these are my suggestions. Satguruji is the one with the answers. Anything else?
Yeah. How do we get dukh? Wait, was it? Do we get dukh when we ask for naam from Maharaj?
ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਹੀ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਆ only Maharaj really knows there how they will give the gift of naam to someone, right? So it may be that's a question they have to ask Maharaj. That's a question that I can't answer.
How can we as individuals, being given Amrit, best embody the values of the Khalsa in our everyday lives?
Treat every breath as a gift from Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji. Take every breath as Sache Padshah Ji giving you another chance. Not every day, not every year, not every breath. ਇਹ ਮੇਰਾ ਕਲਗੀਆਂ ਵਾਲਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਹ ਪਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ it's very hard to live that. It's very easy and very poetic to say it. But after that day of Amrit, you know, the idea is ਕਿ ਬਸ ਹੁਣ ਪਿਛਲਾ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ. Now your breath is that which ਕਲਗੀਆਂ ਵਾਲਾ is giving to you. So treat that breath as Kalgiyan Wale's gift. And if you forget, remind yourself. And if you forget again, then remind yourself again and carry on reminding yourself. ठीक है जी?
Haji. So the next question is the English translation of Spirit of the Sikh and Other Books by Professor Puran Singh Ji a good resource to learn about Sikhi?
Yeah, definitely. Professor Puran Singh is a great writer. But to really understand Professor Puran Singh, you have to be doing it yourself. Professor Puran Singh delves into things which can't be understood with an analytical or logical mind. They have to be understood through Simran. So if you are, you know, if you are going to be reading Professor Puran Singh, then please be doing Simran alongside.
Is hearing music during Simran something?
I didn't understand. Can you repeat the question?
So the question was literally, it just says, is hearing music during Simran something? Like that's what the person.
I'm not really sure about that. Maybe the person who asked that question can send me.
And then looks like the Sangat is just currently typing out the rest of their questions. But Sangatji, if anyone wants to come on voice and unmute their mic and ask Paisab a question directly, feel free to. Also, another question is, would you recommend maybe doing Simran before reading?
Yes. Before reading Professor Puran Singh, whilst reading, definitely Simran karo. I'm not saying, you know, ਪਹਿਲਾਂ 20 ਸਾਲ ਬੰਦਗੀ ਕਰੋ, then pick up Professor Singh. When Japji too. What I am saying is if you are going to try and get the full taste of Professor Puran Singh, then you should also be doing Simran.
All right, Sangat ji.
Waheguru ji ka-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Puneet.
Waheguru ji ka khalsa, Waheguru ji ki fateh. So I had a quick question. So this is Puneet, and I was just wondering. So a lot of our organizations in the diaspora, we're doing a good job right now in the protests and helping support, but I still feel like there's a gap that needs to be bridged with Sikhs on the ground, and I feel like the understanding on both sides is not really there. What do you think is the best way to kind of bridge the gap between um, both the diaspora and Sikhs that are in Punjab and wider India?
I think, firstly, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. There are many aspects, right, to what's going on in Punjab and to the diaspora and to how we interact with Punjab and how we interact with Punjabis. Now, I don't want to give a generalization, but a lot of us in the diaspora, I don't know what your parents have told you, but many people, oh, India na ਜਾਈ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਉਹ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਲੁੱਟ ਉੱਤੇ ਤੂੰ ਸਾਰੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, like everybody in Punjab.
Mhm.
We have these things put into our head that, you know, all Punjabis are money hungry, that all Punjabi born people are looking to get out of Punjab somehow, that they will that somehow they will trick you. And these things are sort of the colonial perspectives about South Asia, which are now being fed to us by, you know, our society. So I think one good thing that this did was, like, many people are saying, "Oh, where's the youth of Punjab?" The youth of Punjab is in Delhi, and they're being, you know, they're being vocal. They're speaking. We had this holier than thou thing in the West, especially those of us in the diaspora, that ਅਸੀਂ ਜੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਚਾ ਲਿਆ. Many people, ਸਿੱਖੀ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਚਲੇ ਗਈ ਆ. Now you see that these youngsters, they still have that Sikhi spirit within them, and that it hasn't gone. So firstly, I think it's shattered this illusion that we had. Okay, we have Sikhi and they don't. So I think bridging the gap now, it's a beautiful question that you've asked. I think bridging the gap isn't something which can be done just in this morcha. I think bridging the gap means we shouldn't just be worried about Punjab when the Punjabis sit on the streets in Delhi. We should be worried about Punjab, or not worried, we should be concerned with Punjab throughout the year. If we now don't have a rapport with those people, why? It's because we haven't made that rapport in the past. We've left it now until, you know, imagine you're in an army and you don't speak to half of the army until you're in the battlefield. That is what we're in now. These conversations, this reaching out to one another, this recognizing the spirit of the Khalsa in one another, that shouldn't just begin now in the thick of it. It should be in peace times, quote unquote, or times when there isn't an active struggle going on, that we should be reaching out to one another. So I would say spend time there, go and see, speak to the youth there. Don't be afraid that, you know, of this and that, these things. And then, you know, people will say, oh yeah, but sanu kisi nu idda hoya si. I understand there are people who are out to dupe people, but that's not just in Punjab, that's in England, that's in Canada, that's in America as well. So I think this relationship with the youth of Punjab and the youth externally, it's not something which we can fix or build overnight. But I think that it's something we need to work on as a diaspora. I'm not sure how, if you want to respond to that, or if that sort of, it's not like a quick fire answer to that question, but it's something which I've felt, that we had this idea in the diaspora that, you know, the Punjabi, look at the way we treat Punjabis when they come to Canada, or when they come to, how do we treat them when they come to our gurdwaras, the students? These now, we have tears in our eyes when we think of them sitting on the streets of Delhi. What about when we stop them from coming into our gurdwaras and coming into our places, into our communal spaces, when they come to a different country? Isn't that the same youth of the Punjab? Aren't they the daughters and sons of farmers? But today, because Modi is oppressing them, you know, we're with them. But when we're against them, you know, we've forgotten that. So this hypocrisy that we have, we only worry about them when, you know, when something like this is happening, and when they come to us. Why have they left Punjab, those people, those students? I understand that many students, you know, the people make mistakes, you know, but, you know, imagine you're going to a different country, you don't have your mother and father, you're going to a different culture, and people are disorientated. People, you know, they do make mistakes. But I digress. The reason why I spent most time answering this question is because it's happening now. So the rapport with Punjab is not just from today, and the rapport with the youth of Punjab, we must all collectively take this time. And, you know, whether it's like this Discord, or whether it's our Instagram groups, or whatever it is, we must reach out to them if we want to have that conversation and to have that relationship, and, you know, to be able to speak to them, because it doesn't happen in the thick of battles. It must happen, you know, when outside of struggle time. Hopefully
Yeah,
that sort of goes towards answering the question a little bit.
yeah, definitely. Like, I agree completely. Because a lot of the time I see that we usually speak at Sikhs in India, and like you said, rather than judging and speaking at and from a place of being holier than thou and saying "Sanu pada, thanu ki pada," this and that, you know, like, because there are cultural differences. They've been brought up in different areas, so understanding um, how they think and why they think, unless you don't understand them when, like you said, peacetime, we won't be able to have like a productive dialogue and have some sort of unity. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, we may say, you know, whatever about Sikhi and youth and whatever, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਆ ਨਾ, like as in the dust of Punjab, that dust of Punjab, you know, kissed the blood drops of the Sahibzade, and that isn't going anywhere, you know. So that will be there, and that is within them, and it takes times like this. You know, they're disheartened. They've been let down by religious organizations. They've been let down by by the government. They've been let down by uh, so many different times. They've been through so much. Their mothers and fathers. We are sitting here in our Western countries, but their mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, well, mothers and fathers, grandfathers and grandmothers, they were the ones who went through 1984 and these times that we talk about, you know. So we have to look at their disillusionment. We have to try and at least have some sort of empathy with their situation. Okay, I think we spent quite a lot of time on that because it's something which is close to my heart. Should we move on?
Hanji,
Sure.
Upkar Singh, you had a question?
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. This question may be a little bit technical, but as you were talking about the 3 stages of Simran, that kind of reminded me of something I read from the Sant Gurdas Singh Ji Satik, Japji Sahib. So what they write is that there's 3 stages of Simran, such as Vachak, Upans, and Manas, which is like, you know, you first listen to the Simran, you first listen to the Gurbani, and then you slowly whisper, then it goes into your Hirda. Is that somehow related to the 3 stages you mentioned?
So Vachak, to put it into English terms, one would be repeating with your tongue, right? Secondly would then be it's the tongue sort of starts. You're no longer saying it loudly, but you're still sort of saying it within your throat. Then it goes into your. So there are 3 stages that the Japji Sahib Satiq talks about. Again, they are related to this. They can be related to the stages of bhakti as well. That, you know, you can make that link between them, because remember, these are all talking about the same thing, but they're just looking at different angles. Spirituality is so wide that you know, you can look at the same thing from different angles. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with associating them with the 3 stages of bhakti.
And I was also wondering, so
Sorry,
is
I
the
forgot to say Fateh to you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Giani ji, I was also wondering about the stages of Simran. When does that Prema Bhakti aspect come into play?
So, as I said, like in Guru Angad Dev Ji Maharaj says, even in the unripe stage, you're in Bhakti, right? And when kardeyan sun naam tumhara pritam prabh pekhan ka chao, listening to your name, beloved, I now, the desire has welled up within me to see or to experience. So you can't put a time scale on it, but those moments come in our life, right? And that when that Prema Bhakti sort of begins, it's there's no time scale, but you know when that feeling has started to come. And it's not that it comes in a big massive gush that one day you're a Kaljugi Jeev, next day you become, a Namrasiya. It comes in little drips first. So little drips will come. And, if you just let that drip become into a stream, the stream become into a river, that river will then become the ocean one day. So it just depends. In naam wale paase jana hai ki kaam wale paase jana hai. It takes time. Hanji. Fateh Paiye ji, ki aje ho
Yeah,
apa karne hain?
there's a lot more questions, Paji. So it all depends on how much time you have, Paji, because we don't want to. Obviously, you're very busy, right? So it's up to you, Paji, how long you want to take.
Just to the Sangat, if we don't get through all the questions, then just take my email address and write me an email, and I'll get back to you whenever I can with something. So we'll go through for another 5-10 minutes. फिर आप फतेह बुला देने हैं.
All right. So the next question is, which writer's work does not require a lot of bandagi and is easy to understand? Also, what literature should we start with if we're just starting to read about Sikhi?
Okay, so it depends upon language. Like if you can read Punjabi or English, that's one question. And then secondly, it begins. It depends upon what you're looking to sort of look into. Some people like reading history. Some people like reading other types of things. So there's Gurbalam Sakhiyan by Bhai Veer Singh Ji. That's a really good little introductory thing. There's stories there, like 2 little story books about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, but obviously written by Bhai Veer Singh Ji, a Gurmukh. So they have a really good. They leave you with a lot of ras. Gurmukh Sikhya by Bhai Veer Singh Ji is good for beginners, people who are beginning Simran. Raghbir Singh Beer, his Bandagi Nama is very good. Power of Prayer or the Ardas Shakti book, that's a very good book. Anything by Raghbir Singh Beer, Bhai Veer Singh Ji is very good. I mean, even Professor Puran Singh, the reason why I said ke Simran now, when you start reading Professor Puran Singh, some of the things that they say can only be tasted, they can't be explained, right? As is with, always with the writing of saints. But, Bhai Veer Singh Ji's Gurbalam Sakhi, as I've said before, Gurmukh Sikhya, Sant Gatha by Bhai Veer Singh Ji is a great book. There's also, Sikh Nihya, all that type of stuff. Even, which are, the lives of saints, Gurmukhs. If you're looking more to do with Gur Ityas, there's a really good book about history, Sikh Raj Kiਵੇਂ ਬਣਿਆ by Tadi Son Singh Seetal. There's also the introductory books to the Guru's history by Principal Satbir Singh. So I think there's 10 of them for each of the Guru Sahibans. And then there's a book by Jaswant Singh Neki, which is called Ardas, which goes through Ardas, funnily enough. There's another book called Gurmat Manovigyan, which is psychology by Jaswant Singh Neki. Very easy, very accessible. Again, it's Punjabi, but it's quite easy and accessible from what I've seen. What else is there? There is, yeah, that's a good place to begin. What I've said to you. There's little books by Dr. Taran Singh, Name Te Prem, Sikh Dharm De Rahas Te Ramaz. They're sort of little introductory books. Bhagti Te Shakti by Dr. Taran Singh. They're all good. It's all good stuff to read.
So
Hanji.
another question is, they say, Paiji, I want to learn from Sampradama, but I don't have a household that really supports, that really supports that. How can I learn from them?
So a lot of Sampradaya Gyanis nowadays via online apps. So like WhatsApp. I don't have WhatsApp. By the way, just to let the Sangat know, but a lot of Giani Singhs teach, or Gyanis teach through WhatsApp. They teach through Skype. They teach through these other apps. So if somebody wants to learn, they can contact me. I teach as well, Santyav Gurbani, and I also teach Katha. I also teach history. I don't have much time because I'm doing Katha and stuff. But yeah, if somebody wants to get in touch with a Sampradayak Gyani where they can learn arths of Gurbani, meanings of Gurbani, and pronunciation, etc., then they can get in touch with me. And you don't need the household to support you. You just need to have access to the internet.
And then Harman Singh, you had a question. Feel free to unmute your mic.
Yeah. Paisabji, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. In yesterday's talk, we were talking about how Punjab has been stuffed with the influence of Hollywood, and they've been strayed away from Sikhi, and they try to aspire to a Western ideal. How do we, to the Punjabi youth, how do we connect with them and then try to show them that this isn't, true life in the West, and try to bring them back into Sikhi, those that have strayed from Sikhi now?
I think that when it's a big vast question, right? Because there's many different things which one could do. Connecting with them, speaking to them, go into your pind and actually speak to the people, speak to the kids who are sitting there, in the pind. Organize, it's not just about organizing camps. Whatever your capacity is, if you're just someone from, Canada, America, XYZ, going somewhere, then go and sit in the pind, speak to them, learn what makes them tick, and then start connecting with them. That's what I think will help in the long run, actually knowing the people you're speaking to and not speaking down. Remember, Karana is about looking at others who may not have as much information or whatever, siblings, not as these poor fortunate souls that we need to save. That mentality comes from a missionary type of mentality, and when I say missionary, I mean like a Christian missionary type of mentality. We must save the lowly, downtrodden, right? In Guru Nanak's house, it's Nicha andar, Nich Jat, Nichi Wat, Nich Nanak Tinke Sang Saath. I am not sitting on a high bench. I am with you, next to you. I'm sitting with those who may be considered, off the path, etc., etc. So have conversations, speak to them, go to Punjab, organize visits to Punjab. Why can't a group of 3 or 4 people from Canada, America, XYZ go and travel from village to village in Punjab, speaking to people, doing prachar? I can't really tell you how to do it, but one way would be to converse with them, to treat them, as you would treat people here. It's not just this. See, this battle which is happening in India now is the battle between capitalism and between the systems which were there before, right? And so, big corporations, whatever, I don't want to get too much into but we have to look at ourselves as well. What are we aspiring to in our lives? How does that same, how do corporations, how are they working here? Where, Ambani, Adani, hi, whatever, right? But then how about the corporations here? How are we buying into that system ourselves? Are we trying to convert people when we're actually on that same path ourselves? Okay, so we may not be idolizing, a Bollywood actor, but are we idolizing, this certain ideal that you must have this much in your bank account, you must have this much, whatever, in our daily lives? Prathame man par bodhe apna pache avri rijave. Gurbani says, first look in your own mind, then start speaking to others. So I think at this point in the world, we all need to assess the way we are living. And, I think that is one of the main ways which we can connect to the Punjabis. Many times the Punjabis who have come over here, they, when I go and do katha, they say, "Paji, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਤਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ." So sometimes it can just be speaking to someone with love can change their heart. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be a long speech. It doesn't have to be someone like me who knows historical dates or whatever. Sometimes it can just be that conversation, showing the other person what Sikhi is, rather than telling them what Sikhi is. If you show what Sikhi is, then people will listen. If you tell what Sikhi is, then people get turned off very quickly. You want them to look at other, at other idols or whatever, or let's say you want them to idealize other people, then put those types of people before them. Be that Sikh of Guru Nanak that Guru Nanak Dev Ji talked about, the one that when you would see them, you'd say, Jodi Sai Gur Sikh Khada Tisne Vine Lagu. So that's what my answer would be to that. Hanji.
Haji, Paisab, if you have any more time, like there's a few other unanswered questions. Otherwise, we can just request the Sangha to email them to you.
We'll take another. Let's take another 3 for Fateh Balad in there.
Okay. All right. So one of the questions is, since most of us are students or working, what time do you suggest to start doing Amrit Vela and then slowly taking it to 96 minutes, as you said?
So Char Kadiyan is, that's again, Char Kadiyan is roughly, because it's roughly 24 minutes over and under. So I would count that time from the moment you get up. So I would say, firstly, don't look at your phone. When I say don't look at your phone, I mean don't start looking at messages. When I go to sleep at night, here it is now 9:46 p.m. I will aim to be in my bed at 10 with Guru's grace. And if I don't do that, mainu pata mera aukha hunda. Firstly, try to aim to sleep on time. Secondly, don't waste time in the Amrit Vela. So when you get up, my phone's on airplane mode. And that happens at 10. And what I try and do is I only take my phone off airplane mode after I finished my Amrit Vela. That means that I'm not suddenly reading BBC News app on my phone, or I'm not suddenly on Telegram, because I don't have WhatsApp. I have another app called Telegram, so that I'm not looking for people's messages, right? So save the time at Amrit Vela firstly. I'm not going to dictate a time to begin, but I would say be sensible with your sleeping patterns. Try and give yourselves 6 or 7 hours of sleep. That's not me, that's Bhai Veer Singh Ji in Gurmukh Sikhya. Bhai Veer Singh Ji says in Gurmukh Sikhya that for a Gristi Sikh, going to sleep at 10 and getting up at around 4 is a good aim. Now, that doesn't mean it will fit everyone. There are Gursikhs who do Amrit Vela much earlier than that, and they arrange their sleeping patterns in a different way. So I'm not going to, that's just me giving the idea that a Gurmukh. Now, that may not work for you. This is a very sort of specific question, right? If you're someone who gets up at like 10 a.m., then obviously 4 a.m. seems very impossible. If you're someone who gets up at 6, then it's more of a goal. So you have to look at your body and, try and progress. But I would say it is better to take small steps which are consistent, then take large leaps after which you fall. Hanji.
Another question is it worth listening to Bani while you sleep? So as in once you fall asleep, it's playing on your headphones as you sleep.
There's always worth in listening to Gurbani. If you can, I can't listen to something when I'm falling asleep usually. So what I will do is Kirtan Swala and then do my little ardas and then do Simran with my breath until I fall asleep. That usually sends me to sleep very quickly anyway. So whatever works for you. If that works for you, I know Gyanis who listen to Katha all night. A certain Gyani who has been, my Ustad who has been in your camp listens to Katha whilst they're falling asleep. So I've seen them do that myself with my own eyes. Personally, I don't do it. Personally, I do my Kirtan Swala and then I do Simran with my breath until I fall asleep. So whatever works.
Paisabji, how important is Sucham and what is Sucham? So the person says, I live in a household with no Sikhi, and so every time I talk about getting Amrit, I just get told that there's no Sucham, we don't want Pap.
So I've done a katha called The 10 Virtues of Khalsa, and one of the hours of katha is about Sucham. Because that whole hour talks about Such, I would advise you to listen to that and then get back in touch with me with questions you have. So you'll find that on my SoundCloud page, and I think one of the moderators or whatever can put the SoundCloud links into the group or whatever, or however this works.
Yeah, no
It's
problem.
called The 10 Virtues of the Khalsa. It's also on YouTube as well.
So we'll add that to our resource section as well as any other resources that you've provided. And the last question we have is how to respond to the feeling of Naam Gawat Gaya.
So that's a good feeling, right? You should have that feeling that when if you have that feeling ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟੁੱਟੇ ਹੋ, first you have to have that feeling. That's the beginning, right? So if you have that feeling of separation, then there's only one. That's to strive forward, to pick yourself up and say, ਜੇ ਟੁੱਟ ਗਏ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਜੁੜੀਏ, ਗੁਰੂ ਦੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰੀਏ. So there's not one way of responding to that, but one way I would say is to respond with an ardas. ਕਿ ਰੱਖ ਲਓ ਸੱਚੇ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ, ਮਿਹਰ ਕਰੋ. Sikhi begins and ends with ardas, right? So it's the very last thing which will happen by your funeral pyre, right? And it's probably one of the first things, or even when you're in your mother. Gurbani says, "Khasm se ti ardas vakha." Ardas happens even whilst you're in the womb. So I think ardas is the best way to respond to that. Hanji, ਇੱਥੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਈਏ ਜੀ ਫਿਰ. If
Hanji.
anyone has any further questions, please email me. Please forgive my mistakes, Sasangat ji. Hanji.
Thank you so much, Paisab, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Sangaji, can we get a Fateh, please?
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਦੁਆਰਾ ਬੁਲਾਵੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਪਾਵੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ। ਗੁਰਬਰ ਅਕਾਲ ਹੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਪੰਕਾ ਫਿਰ ਕੀ ਹਰ ਮੈਦਾਨ ਫਤਿਹ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।